My name's Eric Strebel, and welcome to another video of mine about industrial design. This is episode 6 of the Adventure Toy Rendering series. Click on the screen here to watch some of the past episodes. In this episode, we're going to take a look at the Dragon Sentinel. I'm going to show you how I used color to keep it simple and make the product a little bit more toy-like. I start this sketch out just like I start out most of the other ones, with some sort of a good, solid underlay so that my perspective is correct. I do this by taking a photograph of some of the toy parts that I snap together and use that to create a good composition and a nice view. You'll note that I cut out some foam core wheels, and I just use a little bit of tape to hold some of the floating pieces in place that will later on get custom plastic connectors to hold them into the PowerClix. So very simple. I take the photograph and I print it and I make an underlay to trace it into my sketchbook, and from there I start marker rendering. As in previous episodes, I've shown you I always start with the wheels first so that if I screw those up, I can start over right away instead of doing them last. In this case, I start with the wheel that's closest to the viewer as it overlaps one of the other wheels. I just lay in some simple, probably a 2 or a 3 gray here to make the wheels a little darker. My light source is coming from the right, and the wheels on the left, of course, are going to be the darkest as that's furthest away from the light source and receiving the least amount of light. So it makes it curved and it looks like it has some depth. I add in a little ground plane shadow, and now I'm coming back and I'm doing the rims inside the wheels. They end up being solid, like a purple, and that's where I start introducing some color into the vehicle. Cars normally don't have purple rims, so you can tell right away it's a little bit more toy-like because of that. You'll note on the drawing there's a 50 and a 60 in the sketch to the left and to the right of the wheels, and that is my ellipse guide number, so I know what ellipse to use, and I figured this out ahead of time, and that way I can just grab the correct ellipse and always make sure that I have the correct template in my hand when I'm working on whatever wheel needs some help. It helps true up the wheel and make it look more realistic. I use a colored pencil here to add a little depth. You can instantly see how that adds some depth with the colored pencil and the highlights in there, and you can really tell where the light source is coming from. Now I add in a little bit of yellow, and I use darker yellow, almost like an orange, to show the parts that are recessed. Yellow is kind of a tricky color in the sense that it doesn't have a huge value change, so you end up having to use like an orange to show form change with the yellow. I throw in some green to show the top of the dragon scales that are draping down the back. These also hold some of the PowerClix together at the top. So here I continue just blocking in my value. This is the big insert click part that holds the rotating guns that can rotate forward or backwards as the vehicle drives around. No big sense of depth yet as I'm just blocking in the values. I do a little bit on the horns in the front. I use 2 shades of green. Here I come back and I block in the value for the big electro gun. Soon I'll come back and I'll start adding in some more depth to show form change as I move forward with markers and colored pencils. Here I'm starting to do that a little bit more with a darker value orange and yellow, and here in the gun probably a crimson to show the surfaces on the bottom are a little bit darker as they're away from the light source. Here, just continuing to block in some values using white Prismacolor and some darker markers to show surfaces that change. I spent a fair amount of time putting in the details with these Prismacolors. That was just a little bit of highlight on top of the wheels. Now I come back in with a little more yellow here, and I got a green pencil as I'm starting to shade in the dragon horns in the front, and I'm going to work on the scales on the actual dragon tail as well, just to add a little bit of detail there. Next, I'm using a Micron 005 pen to outline some of the wheels and start to make them pop a little bit, as well as some of the PowerClix that are overlapping and facing the user, to help pull them away from some of the other elements, and to kind of outline everything like that in the Sentinel here to make it jump off the page. Now, a lot of times when you're sketching, things just don't turn out the way that you want. In this case, I went in with this Micron pen, and I decide I just don't have enough of that dark outline to give it the punch that I want, and I come back in here with a pen that's a little bit heavier line weight, and I don't go over all the Micron stuff, but the main outlines that have overlapping parts to help them pull away from the elements behind them. Next, I come back in with my jelly roll here, add a few more highlights. The gun is looking a little bit flat to me. Now I just come back and I see a lot of stuff is still kind of flat for me, and so I come back in, darken things up, get it to where I want. I decide in this case that I want to add a little bit of gouache. I want to add some highlights to make things pop even more, and I do this with the gouache as it's the opacest. I don't do it a lot because I find it's a little bit messy. I have to mix up the gouache, get out my brush, and ultimately I have to wash the brush. But in this case, the results are worth it, as I can really get that super bright white highlights that I just couldn't get out of my jelly roll. So that's it. I keep it super simple, no spending too much time in one area, just enough detail to tell the story. That's all you need. If you like this episode, come back next week, same time. We're going to take a look at an off-road all-terrain vehicle. One more thing. I found another sketch just below this one in my sketchbook. It's a top-down 3/4 view from the rear, so you can see what the vehicle looks like from here. This is also super basic sketch. Barely has any marker in there, just enough to sort of give it some form and to show what's going on from this view. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can click on the little icon on the bottom right of the screen to do that. You can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Google+. Rock on.